And now you can see that we actually have toggling ability and it's visually represented. That's so cool. What's up, guys? It's your friend and your guy and your favorite creator who only says things that you agree with 100% of the time, Gardiner. If you didn't subscribe to this channel for hot takes, this video is for you. Today we're going to be talking about web components because I'm a web designer and web components are freaking amazing. Web components allow you to add dynamic functionality to custom tags in your HTML. It sounds crazy, but it actually works and it's awesome. Let's talk about how web components work, and then we're going to build a simple web component. So the first thing that we're going to do is we have some boilerplate HTML here. This is pretty bog standard when it comes to HTML. The only thing here is I'm specifying our style sheet, and I'm also bringing in main.js here. And then in the body tag, we have a form element with a submit button. And you can see here we have a preview of what is actually what this code actually would look like when it's interpreted by a web browser. And this is Firefox. For everyone who's saying, oh my God, you're using VS Code. No, it's the open source fork of VS Code that doesn't have the telemetry. Don't worry your pretty little head, okay? So what I want to do is I want to fix a part of web forms that bothers me to no end. Web forms really irritate the crap out of me. And there's a few reasons why that is. The first reason is that checkboxes don't work as I think they should. Intuitively, they work wrong to me. So let's actually add a checkbox, okay? Let's do input type checkbox, and then let's give it a name of Sally. Why not? So this is a Sally checkbox. Now you would think, if you go over here and you were to submit this form, then Sally would be equal to, true or false, right? You would think that just instinctually. If you don't know how the web works, you would think that that would be the case. But you can see here, this is a GET request. This is a GET form. So we'll say method equals GET. And we can see the results of our submission here when we click this button. And you can see here that we have a question mark, but there's nothing. There's nothing there. So if we click on the checkbox and we click submit, it's going to say Sally equals on. And that is weird behavior, in my opinion. I kind of understand that. And if you don't have it checked, then Sally does not equal anything. So there are ways around this, right? You can do a hidden input before the thing. You can say type equals hidden. And then you can say name equals Sally. And then you can give it a value of off. And now, whoops, hello, let's add a closing angle bracket. And now if we refresh the page and we hit submit, Sally is off, and now Sally is on. We can see Sally off and Sally on. When a web server receives that request, Sally off and then Sally on, it's only going to equal Sally on, but that is a crazy behavior in my opinion. I don't like how that works. So let's fix it. Let's make a web component because having this kind of stuff in your page just kind of blows my mind. So let's make a new element, and we're just kind of going to call it input switch. And we'll give it a name, and we'll call it Sally. I don't know why I'm saying Sally. Let's call this Truthy. Sure, why not? Truthy. There we go. So now we have input switch Truthy. But you can see nothing appears there. And if we open up our development tools, we can see that we do have an input switch, but it's not styled, and there's no behavior assigned to the custom element input switch. Now, input switch is not part of HTML. This is something that we are defining as a custom tag. And the way you define a custom tag is pretty simple. You just have two or more words separated by a dash as the tag name. So you could do input switch large, or you could do anything like that, and that would be a custom tag. We're just going to say input switch. And now the next thing that we have to do is actually, let's do a little bit of styling. So let's define some custom variables, because I like CSS variables. They're really nice. Let's say inactive switch. And let's give it a value of that. And then let's do active switch. And that's probably good. Now, let's say input switch. And we're going to give this some styling. So let's say it's a display type of block. It might be inline block. We'll network with this. We'll figure this out. And we'll say, so let's say the height is 24 pixels. And let's say the width is 64 pixels. And we can figure this out after the fact. This is just going to give us like a placeholder. Let's do a border radius of 24 pixels. Now, if we refresh the page, we can see that something has changed, but we don't know what yet. So let's do background color is equal to var inactive switch. Now we have defined the style for the basic input switch, but it doesn't have any logic to it. So let's actually go in here to main.js. So let's make a class, and we'll call it input switch element. And then it doesn't matter what the name is. We'll assign this web component controller to our tag in a minute. And it needs to extend with an S, extends HTML element. And there we go. Now we have our element. And then we need to type custom elements. And then we're going to define. And then the name of our element, which is input switch, followed by input switch element. And there you can see this right now has defined a custom HTML element as well as like logic to be executed when that element is created or destroyed for that matter. Now the first thing we want to do is create a constructor. So let's do that, constructor. And it doesn't need to accept any arguments. I don't think you can accept arguments. And let's just say super, because when you're extending a class like this, you actually have to call super in order to call the constructor of the parent element, or the parent class in this case. And what we want to do is just make this a little bit of an extensible thing. So let's say this tab index equals 0. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to use the tab key to tab to the item and focus on that item. And that's really important for accessibility. Now, I'm not by any means an expert on accessibility, but this is a really important step that to make sure that your web forms are accessible to people who, use computers in other ways. And now we're going to add another method, and this is going to be connected callback. Callback. There we go. And this method is going to be run anytime the element is attached to the DOM. So when your page is first rendered and you have input switch in your DOM, when this gets interpreted by the browser, then this functionality is going to be run. This method is going to be run. So this is really handy because even if, like here we have our main.js set below the input switch, main.js is still going to take effect, which wasn't necessarily the case with HTML interpretation in the past. One of the most crucial parts of this design here is actually going to be having the browser automatically add child elements to the input switch tag. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is very simple. All you have to do is type this inner HTML equals, and then we can add input name, and then we're going to this get attribute name. Let's say type equals checkbox. And then let's give it a value of true. And you know what? Actually, let's move this out. We don't need this here. We want this to be here. This. Actually, let's put this in the constructor. This dot name equals this get attribute name, and then we can say this name. So here we have our input name, our input type checkbox, and we have our name, this name, and we have a value of true. Okay. And as we saw earlier, we actually probably want to have an input type hidden name equals this dot name, and we want to give it a value of false. Now, this is going to be a string value rather than a Boolean value, but you can use server-side parsing to determine if it's false or true, and you can convert it to a bool if you want that way. Now, the last thing we need to do is add a span, and we're just going to give it an area hidden equals true. Okay, so there might be other ways to do this, but this is the most concise way in code to do this. And you can see I'm using graves or backticks here in order to create a template literal string. And we can use this syntax here in our template literal to reference variables and actually do other things like carry out function calls and such. It's very useful. It makes for much cleaner looking code like that. So now if we save and we refresh the page, you can see that we actually have a checkbox here. Pretty nifty, right? But this still isn't the type of like toggle switch that we're accustomed to on touch devices and if you're using Linux like GNOME. So let's go into our styles and let's start assigning some styles here. The first thing that we want to do is do input switch input type equals checkbox. And let's just say display visibility hidden. And then let's do input switch span. And let's say position absolute. Let's give it a height of 100% and a width of 100%. Let's say top is 0, left is 0. And let's give it a box shadow to give this a little bit of visual flair. Let's say 0, 0. We'll give it a spread of 6 pixels. And let's give it an RGBA value of 0.3 maybe. And let's make it inset as well. Now if we refresh the page, you can see it's not quite... Why is that not working? Oh, right. Yeah. We need to add a position relative here. And now we have a relative position. And now you can see that the span here actually has the box shadow. But what we want to do is, first, let's also make this border radius. And let's give it 24. And now if we refresh, there you can see it actually fits really nicely. And we can also do overflow hidden. And it would cut off if we didn't have the border radius. I like it with the border radius though. Let's leave that. So we're getting there. We're getting there. I think it's actually looking pretty snazzy so far. So let's go ahead and do input switch span before. And let's do a height of, let's say 90%. And then let's do a width of 50%. Let's see how that looks. Oh, yeah, we didn't. And let's say content equals that. Before and after elements have to have content defined. And then you also have to do display block. And let's also do background white. And there you go. There is that. And that's probably a little too tall. So let's do 80. And then let's also set this as position absolute. And let's set its value to top 10%. And there we go. Now left 10% as well. Border radius. Let's get a good border radius on here. 20 pixels. That works for me. 20 pixels will work. But this left position, we don't want it like this. Let's do it at 5%. Sure, why not? Okay, so there we go. That's starting to look really nice. I'm actually really liking how this looks. So let's go ahead and move on to the next CSS trick, because a lot of this is actually just going to be CSS tricks. So let's do input switch, span, actually input switch, input checked. And then let's do span before. And that needs to be a plus in there. Then let's say left equals 50%. Why is that not working? Oh, right. So if we make this a checked box, use this in console and type checked equals true. There you go. Now we're set. Okay. So let's go ahead and set this to 45%. Yeah, that looks good. 45%. That's looking really nice. I'm digging that quite a bit. Finally, let's copy this plus span and give the span a background color of var active switch. And now, yeah, the problem is that, you can click on this, but nothing's going to happen. So let's go back to our main. And in connected callback, let's say this add event listener, click, and then we're going to have an event. But we need to actually define what that event's going to be. So let's give this a name called input listener, because we're going to actually use this to do keyboard inputs as well. And let's say this input listener. And then let's say E, and then listen for an event. So basically what we're doing here is on this element, we're going to add an event listener. We're listening for a click event, basically. And then we're going to have E, which is the event object, and we're going to pass E to this input listener, which is this function down here, and then event is going to be there. Query selector, checkbox. And let's assign this to a variable. So this is going to be const checkbox equals that. And then let's say checkbox dot checked equals not checkbox dot checked. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow the value of the state of the checkbox to be flipped back and forth when you've clicked on the item. So let's go ahead and refresh the page. And now you can see that we actually have toggling ability. It's also visually represented when the checkbox is either true or false, as in checked true or not. That's so cool. This video has run quite a bit longer than I expected. So in the next video, we're going to actually talk about adding more functionality to this, adding a little bit more accessibility, and maybe livening it up and making it look a little nicer. So make sure you tune in for that. I hope that you enjoyed this departure from the kind of content I normally do. I'd love to get into more of this. And if this video does well, if you guys want to see more of this, let me know in the comments, because this is my bread and butter. This is what I love doing. I want to say thank you to all of my patrons over on Patreon who make what I do here possible, and all of my YouTube members who make this possible. If it wasn't for you guys, I would not be able to do this. I want to give a special shout out to Matt Dancer, one of my top tier Singularity members. Matt, my dude, you are truly appreciated. Your support is amazing. But I think that's going to do it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, I appreciate you being here, spending time with me, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now, and have a blessed day.